Welcome to Aaron Plays. In this episode I'll be continuing my playthrough of Nemesis, Burma 1944 by Legion Wargames, designed by Kim Ganger. In the last episode I drew the supply chit for the Japanese, and that's what we will be doing in this episode, is looking at the supply situation for the Japanese at present. So when you're working out supply, the first thing I'd like to do is recommend, whenever you play this game, to download 4 playthroughs or guides which are designed by a Michael Ormet, www.wargamesforeveryone.net. This is what I'm looking at here. Okay, he's done one for the sequence of play, one for the combat procedure summary, and one for unit transporter attributes and behaviours, and one for track management summary. These are extremely useful. Again, there's 16 pages of rules, so it's not many, but those 16 pages of rules have a lot of meat on them. There's a lot of interactions on here that would almost convey as if the rule book was a 42 page rule book, but the designer has managed to put it into 16 pages, which all makes sense. But using these cuts it down to effectively 8 pages and are extremely useful. So as it says on here, supply is traced in movement points, and you treat it as if it was a light unit, as the ones with the white background moving, on a road or track from a supply entry hex of any length or within range of a supplied depot stroke transporter. So using my examples, which I've been doing a lot of on the southern portion of the map board, so let me just bring the camera down so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, using here, alright, this is a supply entry hex. Okay, so anything that's along this road or track of any length, okay, not path, it's not here, so any length from that supply entry hex, as long as there's no enemy sitting on it, can actually trace supply. Even an enemy zone of control does not stop a supply trace. So at the present moment, as we look at these, and I'm going to put little yellow counts up, this stack is automatically in supply, and this hex are automatically supplied from that supply source. So as it says in the rules, enemy zone of controls does not prevent any trace. So carrying on that example, so we have Kaduma as a supply source, following along this road here, going along this road, so even though this unit is exerting a zone of control in here, that supply still gets through to that HQ, which is the 15th HQ. So they're in supply by the same methodology. Okay, so looking around the board, as I said, I've been focusing on that area. I'm going to mark all the other hexes that I've got full supply for the Japanese. So looking at the map, I'll just pan up here. Okay, so you can see these are in supply. This one's here supplied, again supplied by this track, then down to the road to here where there is a supply entry hex. Remember, that's the cream border around the hex. These two are show here now. Okay, so these two are in supply because again it traces down to Kambula, which is here. I'm going to put a little red box in there, so that's legitimate trace. And then panning across a bit more. Okay, so this unit here is in supply because it traces back to, I have no idea how to pronounce it, I'm just going to embarrass myself, so I'd rather not say that. Okay, but also, let's pan up a little bit here. Alright, there's a supply trace along this road here, all the way along, to here, through and down. So they're in supply. They're in supply. They're not in supply via that methodology. I'll be working out if they've got another path of supply in a moment. Okay, and again, if I scroll along, okay, you can see there's a couple more Japanese units. This one's sitting on a trail that goes all the way back to here, which has got the road on it. And as we look a little bit further, okay, these are all sitting on this road, which traces back. Oh, it's just off camera. Well, you can even trace back to here. Oh, back to here. Or there is another supply, Entry Hex at La Shio. So the majority of the Japanese units currently being supplied by that first option, which is any length along a trail or road. Okay, so now let's have a look more detail, but again going back into the little area that I'm focusing on down the bottom here. Okay, so these units, are they in supply? Now, there's a path along here, and they've got this depot here. This depot is in supply because it's within the road distance here, and this has got a range of 5. So, and its class is moving as if it was light troops. So light troops pay a movement cost in non-monsoon at the present moment of half on a road and 1 on a track and 1 on a path, unless it's in a mountain. Okay, it's 2 on a path in a mountain. So from here, so that's 1 movement point, 1.5, 2, 3.5, 4, 5.5. Because there's 2 along this path. So I was thinking, well, they're out of supply. But that's why I've got to read very carefully the path in the mountain. Okay, let me show you. I don't want to be accused of giving the finger like I was in the previous video. Path in a mountain. Okay, I can't get it into the camera. Let me just bring that up. There we go. So, if entered by light troops, then the cost is 1 or 2 during heavy monsoon. And remember, the supply is treated like light troops. This is one of the reasons I have little issues with this terrain effects chart, but it is highlighted in brown, and maybe I'm just a bit anally retentive and I can't think like Kinganga does. So there we go. So going back on that then, because they're treated as light troops, so it's 1, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5. They are most definitely in supply. So I'm going to stick a little yellow cube on those. These are just reminders for me. Age thing. Although I checked that one, I'm not too sure. Right. So now going back to go into this guy in the mountains. Alright, so at the present moment it's 1, 2, and mountains as light troops cost 3, 3, 4, 5. So he's in supply from the Kalawa depot. Alright. And then that HQ can throw it forward another 4 movement points. So he throws it into there. So both of those stacks are in supply thanks to the HQ and the pack animal. Well, the pack animals aren't necessary, but the HQ throws the supply forward. Automatically 1 hex into those mountains there. So this is using the point 2. So you've got the first one, which is along a road or trail, any distance, and then it's from a depot within the range as printed on the actual counter, on the board, or on the counters in the case of the HQs. And remember, supply is thrown forward, not like in most operational games where you actually trace back. So you trace from the unit that's giving the supply to the unit that is receiving the supply. So now looking at this unit here, well, this depot is got a range of 5 and it's supplying 1, 2 to that unit, so he's in supply. he's in supply for the same reason. But now we get to where there might be a little bit of difficulty. That's up in this area. Okay, so this is the depot, or one of the depots. In fact, there's 2 depots in the area. I'll mark the depots in red, make it easier for myself and yourselves to see. So this can throw the supply. 5 is the range. So down the trail, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So that HQ is in supply. He can then throw it again a further 4 movement points from there. So into there will cost just 1. Into there for 2, and into there for 3. So currently, supply, and into that other one also in supply. And this unit here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, straight along the trail, moving as light troops, or 1, 2, 3, 4, using that one there. So this whole invasion force attacking the Commonwealth are in supply. But they're actually, if you notice, quite close to the limit of their supply. So it'll be interesting as the offensive continues. So moving the camera, so now it's this unit, or this stack. The nearest depot for them, there's 4 there. Is this a depot? Doesn't look like it. No, it's not. So that's 4 movement points. That's a half, 1.5, 2.5. So they are in supply. Okay, so I'm running out of little yellow cubes. Okay, and then moving the camera along to the last area of the board. Is this one here? Actually, he counts for the first reason. He's actually on the end of that trail, so he's automatically in supply for the. So there's 2 guys in the mountains, which you can see just off the edge here. Nearest depot is here, and it's 1, 2, 3. So he's in supply, and then you go 1, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5. He's in supply, and I haven't got a yellow cube to put on him, but there we go. That is the last of the Japanese units anyway. So the entire Japanese army in turn 1 is in full supply. So that will end the Japanese supply check. The supply check has been done. If anything had been out of supply or limited supply, I would go through those rules, but we won't go through those because they might or probably will apply when we go on to the Commonwealth's supply situation, when their supply chit's drawn. So I'm now going to draw a chit for the Commonwealth as the next action. So far they've had their assault chit. So let me just give that a nice little shake. I can't see it, and we get how convenient, the supply check. Well, I was going to end the video, but as we're doing supply, let's all put it into one video. Honestly, that was a random draw. You know, honestly, would I lie? I'm not lying. Honestly, it was. So first of all, I'm going to use the same mythology that I did with the Japanese. So again, focusing on here. So the Commonwealth Supply Entry Hex is this one up here at Dimpur. It's got a grey background. So that's the Supply Entry Hex. Okay. And then we look at all these units on the road. So this is the road all the way down and the trail. So that will then put all 4 of those units, which is what we were worried about when the Japanese had the road cut in their assault. So all those 4 are in full supply. The guys in Impala are in supply, and this is a road continuing on through here. So up to those 2 there, they are in supply. Okay, those 2. Right, so, and those right at the top, I'm not going to put a chit on those 2 because they're on the outside arm range. Unless I stand up, and then I'll make all funny noises and such forth. So, looking at these forces here, he's on a road, he's on a trail, these guys are in mountains, so we'll get to the details of those in a minute, but those 2 definitely in supply for that reason. And the Chinese forces in Yunnan, if I can bring the camera over, there's a lot going on over there. We have, I'll mark in red the actual supply sources, so we have a supply source here and here. Are they both in camera? Yes. Okay, there's a road that only goes to hit. Oh, is there a supply source at the top? And a supply source at the top there. Okay, so there's only actually 1 unit on a road, and that's here. So that's the first condition applied for. As we're over here, so we'll now start applying the other conditions. Okay, so in this actual one over, and it's called Yongdi. Alright, this is right over the edge here. It's got a supply stretch of, a supply range of 3. Okay, remember it's classed as light troops. These units are within 1. So they're automatically in supply because they're adjacent to the supply source. Remember, supply can always go 1 hex. So with that in mind, that's adjacent to that, so that's going to be in supply. And that's there is adjacent. So now we go a bit more range. This has got a range of 3, 1, 2. And it's still following the path, 1, 2, 3. So all the Chinese forces on the Yunnan front are in supply. Over to these guys here. Alright, this one's on a path, and this supply source here has got a range of 3. 1, 2, 3, that way. And this one is adjacent to the HQ, so therefore in supply as well. Right, now we go over to the Chindits. Okay, they've noticed, if you notice, they're actually currently marked with limited supply counters, because these guys are receiving air supply. Units on an airfield, which that one is, get air supply, and so does that one. But this, I'm actually going to mark it in red to show the difference. They stay in limited supply. I think I need to go in a little bit more detail about limited supply. If in limited supply, you can only trace via limited supply options. It has half strength value when attacking and full strength when defending. With large units, you place a limited supply counter on them. With the actual small units, you can actually flip them over, and they have like a strange beigey coloured background on their combat value. So they attack at half value, and they defend at full value. They move. It suffers what's called limited movement. It's not exactly half movement. I'll go into that in detail in a little bit, what actually it means by limited movement. So how do you get limited supply? There's 2 types of air supply. You've got airfields and you've got air drops. So an airfield functions as a supply entry hex if you control it. So these guys sitting on here, it is a supply entry hex. but it only supplies, but an airfield can only provide limited supply and only to Allied units. And as they have no HQs or anything similar, like some mules or anything like that, then they can't extend it from that hex. So the supply in that hex is supplied, and anywhere adjacent will be in supply from that airfield. There's also an airfield over here. So those are classed as supply entry hex. Now these guys, they're just sitting on the road. And that's where the Allies have got to use airdrops. They have 4 airdrop counters, which we stretch. Okay, and they can drop. They've got. Doesn't matter if they use the American or the British Commonwealth. These all classed as the same, and these can be dropped. The Allied player may, during this phase, place them on hexes that contain Allied units on a road or track, but no further east than right. There's the 0500 hex side, which, let me just move the camera. No further east than this hex row here, unless may benefit from it. Okay, they are the Chindits, the Galahad, which are the American units up the top there, and there's another unit called the Shy, which may benefit from air supply up into this hex row away over here, west of that. So that's the limitations on the air supply. With the Chindits, they can get air supply up to and including effectively that hex row there. Other units only up to, as I showed just now, this hex row here, little yellow arrow. So to put them in supply, they've got to do an airdrop. So let's do that for those 2 units there. Oh, bring the camera up. So what I'm doing. So I've done an airdrop here and here. Putting those in limited supply as well. Okay. So now we move the camera along back to this area of the front. So I'm going to start at the top here. Alright, so the road supply is coming here for 1, and then along the path for 2. Remember, it's classed as light troops, so 2, 3. So both of these stacks are in supply from the entry hex, which is also depot. It can actually stretch up to 4 hexes from that depot. So they're not classing with the road, but they are classing from Dimpur, which has got a value of 4, which brings these 2 in. Carrying on down the example, 1, 2, 3. And this unit here, it's 3 movement points. There's a HQ here though, which has got a range of 5. So it comes down to the Impala, and then they go 1, 2, 3, 4 into there. And these guys here, carrying on, so it's 1, 2 into there. I hope that all makes sense. And that is the Allied supply situation. So they've had to use 2 of their air supply, which is useful, that they didn't have to use all 4 of them, or especially that if these guys had, I say these guys and you can't even see what I'm doing, if these guys had been still cut off, I'd have had to use air supply for them. So I remove those 2 supply counters, put them back in the pile, ready to be sorted, and then I'll just remove all these cubes. Okay, so I mentioned limited movement. Limited movement is where, I'm just getting to the actual page, right, okay. So a unit or transporter in limited supply or that is out of supply can only do limited movement. So it's not half movement. They use the word, it pays the full movement cost of terrain. So no road, track or path movement costs are used. It pays the cost of crossing any major river, and it may not do operational stretch. Road, track and path X's still exist when it comes to tracing supply, stacking, air supply, and determine whether motorised units are allowed to enter. So a unit that is on limited supply, if it's got 4 movement points and it wants to move along a path in the mountain, which would normally cost it 2, it would actually cost it the full 3. Which is not quite half movement, but it effectively allowing him to move 1 hex. But if he was on a road in the clear, he would be paying 1 movement point per hex. The clear cost, he wouldn't be paying the half movement, which is the road cost. So they don't get the benefits of road, tracks or paths. The other supply state you can be in, other than limited supply, is out of supply. Well, no one suffered that, but I might as well mention it as we're here in the supply. If a unit is out of supply, it suffers limited movement, which we've gone through, and cannot assault. It has half strength when attacking and defending in any phase, because it can still attack in the attack phase, but it'll be at half strength. And it's marked with an out of supply marker. So that's the effects of supply. The other one is you take the risk of attrition, but I'm not going to go into detail on the attrition until we need to, because it's, again, let's just say it's based on your quality when you actually start taking step losses from out of supply, but we'll go into that in more detail on another video. Okay, so that's the supply. Both sides have had their supply chit drawn. So we go back to the Japanese, and let's see. There's only 2 chits left now. There's the reinforcement chit and the attack chit. So doing a random shake, drawing the chit out, and it's the Japanese attack chit, which we'll do in the next video. Thank you for watching. If you would like to hit that like and subscribe button and the and the bells, if you've enjoyed what you've been watching, please do so. It all helps, encourages me to do more of these videos, especially the comments. I've had some really nice comments for this, and it really does motivate myself, and I think it probably motivates most people. It is nice to know that people are enjoying what I'm doing, and it encourages me to continue. So until next time, I'll see you in the jungles and mountains of Burma,